Hello and welcome to this video on the Werther effect. This video is about a concept called the Werther effect, and we say concept as it's similar to the Streisand effect. That is, wherein the more something is suppressed, the more it is covered. In this case it's the opposite. The more you cover something, the more it becomes so. In this case we are talking about self-deletion or permanent checkout, given how YouTube treats these kinds of videos. There's a surge in cases after a highly publicized case or example. This phenomena is called the copycat self-deletion. It takes its name from a social phenomena, or more perhaps accurately to call it a clinical phenomena, which is particularly important in school settings where it can create a cluster of cases. A similar phenomena to what happens with highly publicized American school-based live fire drills. Where this is odd is not that it happens, but how long the history is. Well-documented examples can be traced all the way back to 1774. This was when a novel called Die Leiden des jungen Werther, or The Sorrow of Young Werther, was published by Johann Goethe, a novel in which a young man who is denied by his crush chooses a permanent solution. Real young men, and wooden puppets who think they are, chose to emulate this scenario. This was the 18th century version of a Tate, if you will. Because of stupidity and the fact this book was considered the cause, the novel was banned in various countries. It also gave rise to the name we used for it, the Werther effect, and given the name of the novel. The phenomena is considered a sort of a contagion, if you will, and that is, once it starts with one person, it begins to spread to others. Mostly it is observed in the age bracket for Chunibos and the elderly, but not the middle-aged. It's likely due to the fact that those who are middle-aged are either too busy trying to pay bills, mortgages, divorce, alimony, loans on their expensive cars, and so on, or compensating for their lack of personal gifts, that they simply don't have the opportunity to consider this. Why we see these differences in the very young and very elderly isn't clear. Although we don't know why, there are definite trends, but it's trends that cannot be explained, and that's the key here. Now, there is some examples of, let's say, triggers for it. For example, in South Korea, there's generally a sort of outbreak following celebrities who, let's say, give a bad example. But this does lead to a certain amount of blame being apportioned to the media, and not unreasonably so, as it's consistent with other similar phenomena, whereupon dangerous behavior increases where and when there is an example to follow. There are two particularly noteworthy examples you can think of. The first is simply peer pressure. Similar to how peer pressure makes someone more likely to behave in a certain way if others around them are doing so, such as smoking, it does mean it will happen. The other example we can think of is the previously mentioned live fire exercises in schools, something unique to American schools. The Werther effect not only predicts an increase in this self-deletion or permanent checkout behavior, but also that the majority of these instances will take place in the same or similar way as the one that was publicized to start with, that there will be a relative geographical connection, that is, say, the same school, or at least the same town, generally speaking, and that most of the people involved will be of a similar age to the publicized individual and event, let's say. So the more closely matched the demographic is, the more likely it is to happen with others. There have been, let's say, solutions put forward to this. Various countries have either instituted or, let's say, voluntarily set up codes of conduct for journalism in particular, regarding coverage, or at least general referral to this, whether it is the actual action or attempts at it. For example, Norway doesn't allow it to be mentioned at all, and this is perhaps one of the more strict, let's say, codes of conduct that are in effect. Others have a far more liberal view of it, and then others again have no rules whatsoever. For example, in America, there's a general note that there isn't any real coverage, yet there aren't really any of these same sort of laws in effect. The different countries, as said, have different codes of practice, and they are distinguished from law in that a law has a government decision behind it, a code of conduct is generally voluntary. In those places where there are, let's say, more stringent, not necessarily laws, but certainly practices in place, there seems to be a reduced effect, at least in terms of individual students. But, as mentioned, say, South Korea, that's not so much the case because of the whole celebrity issue. And so, although you may find it applicable in certain contexts, it certainly hasn't stopped the larger issue. And this is, to a certain extent, what the Werther effect is, but more importantly, some of what needs to be done to counter it and stop it. But sadly, not every country's implemented the remedial methods to, if not prevent the Werther effect, at least reduce it. Although it is noteworthy that the original novel that gave rise to this is still available. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please do post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.